So I'm now going to hand over to Ian Mitchell and Alex Everard to talk about leasing and retailer trends. Now I mentioned leasing momentum, and clearly we had another excellent quarter, and Ian's going to run through the performance in a bit more detail. Now Ian is been with our business for 7 or 8 years now. Ian joined us from Westfield, where as part of our heading up our extensive and experienced commercial team. Ian was involved in things including the leasing of Westfield Stratford, and clearly many achievements since his time at Hammerson. So great to have Ian here. And Alex Everard. Alex joined our Insights team, head of Insights. Alex joined us from Javelin Group, Insight Group, last year. We're very pleased to have Alex on board, and he's really working with us, helping us to understand retailer trends, market trends, and retailer behaviour. And Alex is going to share some insight from a new survey that we've conducted this year around the future needs of the retailer. So with that, I'll hand over to Ian.
So hopefully I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into the world of leasing, the trends that are happening out there, the challenges that some of the retailers are facing, but equally the opportunities that affords us as a portfolio. First of all, I just wanted to touch upon the record volume of leasing across the shopping centres, and this covers both the UK, Ireland and France. You'll see that the Q3 numbers up to there have hit 20 million, 19.9, and then that's against the 2016 number of just over 14 million. So as you can see, a very impressive 42% year-on-year increase in leasing activity. In terms of notable UK centres where there has been a lot of very active leasing, Pete Cooper will come on to talk about West Quay specifically later on, but there has been a high volume of leasing activity here at West Quay. And when you wander around later on, you'll see new deals that we've done with retailers such as an upsized Apple store. We've done on the lower level, Hugo Boss, we've done Smiggle. We've done in the regions of about 10 leasing deals this year at West Quay alone. Now to my home country, to Scotland and to Glasgow, to Silverburn. We've been very active in the mall in Silverburn this year to date. We've done leasing with upsizing of JD Sports. We've done Flannels, who have performed exceptionally well since opening. And we've also got Tim Hortons Cafe. So this is the first Tim Hortons in a shopping centre in the UK. And you add that to the restaurants and cinema that was opened 3 years ago, which is leading to the outperformance of Silverburn in terms of footfall and sales in comparison to some of the others. And then finally at Brent Cross, although Brent Cross clearly is, we're going to be redeveloping that in the forthcoming years, the leasing activity hasn't let up on there either. We've relocated All Saints, we've upsized JD Sports, and also the jewellery sector is performing exceptionally well, where we've upsized both Ernest Jones and Fraser Hart. So all examples of really good leasing momentum that we've had in terms of the UK. Now, retailers are facing and experiencing a lot of headwinds out there. We're very clear of that, and we see that day and daily because myself and the leasing team are experiencing and seeing that day and daily. As I say, I'll come on and explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But the assets that we've got and the investment that we've made make them incredibly attractive to retailers because they're able to drive sales, and as a result, the demand for those centres continues. In terms of the leasing team, I've got a great team, a dedicated team of about 15 people who are absolutely motivated and focused on delivering leasing deals. It's getting tougher out there. Some deals are taking longer, but we've got the skill sets to respond to that. And part of this is about responding quickly to a changing market, and I firmly believe that we've got the right people to deliver that as the market changes. I love this image here. Probably won't excite most people, but it excites me. The reason I like this image is because it talks about an immersive campaign. If you look closely, you'll see that the new store, this is Bullring, and the Coach store that's opened, the image here is the same as that's on the digital screens. So what has happened is that Coach will have taken the digital media across the whole centre. And as you walk round, you'll see that pop up around the centre, reminding you that Coach has just opened, where it is and what they've got to offer. And this is a revenue stream for us. You know, the retailers pay to take that space. So for me, this is a good example of where we have new openings and retailers capitalising on how they can exposure to shoppers and customers. Just an interesting little story here. Unfortunately, it's behind the digital screen, but there's Ted Baker sitting there, one of my favourite stores that we've fitted out in the portfolio, actually. I remember 3 years ago collectively, it was a very tough decision financially to do that deal. And since then, on the back of that, we would call that a leader deal, where it enables us to attract further names. We've done leasing to people like Michael Kors, to Whistles, to Lacoste, and more recently to Russell and Bromley, and obviously Coach. Now the Zone A, headline Zone A's in that mall have been on a journey as well. So when we did that Ted Baker, we were just round about £200 Zone A. That increased to 225, 235, and the latest deals are showing about £250 Zone A. So, you know, clearly that's not everywhere, but what my point is that by focusing on particular areas, getting the retail mix right, you're then able to deliver not only sales, but it clearly generates supply demand for those better quality of brands to come into the shopping centre. I'm not sure if this looks a bit like a political swingometer, but the sort of purpose of this is really to show you that it's quite difficult to get across sometimes the granularity of the leasing deals that we do. So this graph effectively shows you our spread of ERVs on deals that we've done in shopping centres, again, UK, France and Ireland this year. So clearly deals that are below ERV here, ranging to ones above ERV on the right-hand side here. Just over half of the deals are within 5% of that ERV target. And to the left-hand side, some of the deals that are below ERV will be ones, as I described in the previous slide, around leader brands that we will secure deals with to bring in other brands and then build in that ERV. And then as you can see down here, there's been a lot of good leasing momentum, particularly through centres like here at West Quay, Brent Cross of Paranor, Dundrum, all contributing towards that rather impressive 8% above ERV. Also in terms of rent reviews, just the point at the bottom there, we have settled in excess around about 90 rent reviews this year to date, and we've secured about 1.2 million in terms of ERV uplift, representing that 7%. Okay, so what's going on in the leasing market out there? This could take some time. I think the point here is to demonstrate that while certain fashion retailers' sales are in decline, and I'll come on to that point in a minute, that there is a huge diversity of other brands across the spectrum that are looking to expand to take further retail space. I'm going to take you through a few of these different sectors and just explain how we are engaging with them and how we are expanding them across our portfolio. First of all, I want to talk about the fashion, the MSU market, that there's been a lot of press about recently. Yes, that is a challenging sector at the moment, but we're seeing varying performances within that. You know, Mark illustrated earlier about ladies' wear being down circa 6-7%. In terms of that market, there are certain brands that are perhaps from Sweden and have a red logo and have H&M on them, driving exceptionally tough bargains in terms of very aggressive terms. And this isn't a UK thing, this isn't a Europe thing, this is a global issue that H&M are having across the world. So nobody is being singled out for this. Thankfully, the rest of them are being much more sensible in terms, and I've been involved in negotiations recently with River Island, with Topshop, and we're renewing leases at the levels of rent that we expected to do so. So, you know, yes, sales are challenging, But I would say that there's one particular retailer that is being particularly aggressive on terms. Now look, there's a lot of other retailers, fashion retailers out there that we're talking to refresh the mix. People like Uniqlo are back again looking at space, albeit selectively. Reserved opened in Oxford Street recently with the new format that they've got there. And there's other brands, who would have thought that internet-only business and Misguided would start taking physical stores. So, we are in dialogue with all these brands that are taking bigger space. And that is clearly with the view to rolling those out across the portfolio as and where that demand exists. In terms of some of the other sectors here, I just wanted to talk about athleisure because Mark picked up on it as well. This year alone, we've upsized JD Sports in 3 locations, and they are trading exceptionally well, and that's taking part of that fashion spend where we have done those deals. Another interesting market is sort of brands and car market. So some of these brands will take short-term pop-up stores or templates and will trial shopping centres to see whether or not the customer base is there. And we encourage that because, for example, Volkswagen have taken a permanent leasing deal with us, as we're in discussions with a couple of others as well. Tesla converted last year at Brent Cross to a permanent leasing deal. And in terms of other brands, good examples, Nespresso. So Nespresso route to market to shopping centres is through kiosks or pop-up stores converting to permanents. We've converted permanents at Oracle. We've got pop-ups or kiosks at Brent Cross. We've got them here at West Quay, you'll see, in Dundrum and Grand Central in Birmingham as well. So that's another route that these brands are taking. And this is about these brands engaging direct with consumers rather than through third parties. And then just at the sort of bottom left, sort of putting together convenient services and personal luxuries. We've done deals with most of these brands across our shopping centres this year so far. People like Metrobank who are taking big space. We have let space to them in Bristol, where we took back the old BHS that we had there and split that. And they're paying very, very, very good rent on that location, and that enables us to split the space and reinvent it. So, I think my point here is that yes, fashion market is tough, but there is a lot of demand coming from other sectors, and for us, it's about how we curate that and how we split space and effectively reinvent that space to re-let it. Another market, food and beverage. So clearly that market has gone through a lot of expansion in the last few years. And my take on that sector at the moment is that this market is going through a period of natural consolidation. And that will mean change. But equally for us, we see that as an opportunity because it allows us to refresh some of the brands that have been in shopping centres perhaps for a little bit longer than we would have liked, able to move those on and introduce perhaps more independent brands or mid-brands that haven't expanded at the same rate previously. And I'll give you, there's a couple of examples up there just to illustrate that point. So if you haven't been to Mowgli, which is Indian street food, get yourself on a train to Birmingham and get into Grand Central. They opened there about 4 weeks ago, and it is an amazing fit-out design, the quality of the environment inside, and it just brings a point of difference, something a little bit different in terms of that food offer. Contar, we did in the Riverside at Oracle recently, and we're about to exchange another deal with them elsewhere in the portfolio. And it's just not restricted to that more street food family dining. We've actually just exchanged the Ivy at Leeds Victoria Quarter, which will bring a fine dining experience to complement that sort of premium retail offer that we already have at Victoria Gate and Victoria Quarter. So I think in summary, it's a changing market. We are very adept and apt to be able to respond to that changing market. Fashion market, particularly the mass market, high street, sales are struggling a little bit at the moment, but there is plenty of demand coming from other areas of the retail sector for us to replace or repurpose space in order to let that. Finally, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an insight around what we do as the leasing team to make sure that we are maximising every opportunity that we have. So, in terms of our focus, as you know, is consistent like-for-like NRI growth. And from a leasing perspective, I wanted to give you a little bit of take on how we look at that. We look at each shopping centre, each individual unit by unit, looking for leasing events, looking for retailers perhaps that aren't performing as well as they could or should be, and I'll come on to that in a second, and actively managing that whole process. And that whole process enables us then to ensure that we play a part in delivering that consistent like-for-like NRI growth. In terms of other contributors to that, it's just not the retail. We've got car park income, we've got commercialisation. You know, commercialisation is approaching a £20 million business for Hammerson at 100%. And that's seen phenomenal growth over the last few years. In addition to that, there is the rent reviews, there's the lease expiries, there's converting those pop-ups to permanents. And I think my point here is that it is just not one thing of just leasing. There's a whole lot of other activities that we can use and do use in order to deliver that NRI growth. We're exceptionally close, and I'm exceptionally proud of the relationship that we have with our retailers and how close we work with them, and that the whole team are close. You know, I'll give you a little bit of an insight to my week so far, so not that anyone else asks, but I'll tell you anyway. But on Monday, yeah, I know you are, you know. You know, on Monday we had a US retailer, a fashion retailer, who came to see us at King's Place. And they are in global cities at the moment, but looking to take slightly smaller format stores. You know, and they were in talking to me about Dundrum, about Terrace de Port, about Leeds, about Birmingham, about Brent Cross. You know, here's a retailer who really knows what's going on globally, but still they're pushing in to do their European expansion. On Tuesday, I went to Monsoon's offices just to have a general catch-up with the CEO there, just to understand what they were doing with their business and how they've reinvented both the Monsoon brand and Accessorize. I then had the delights of travelling up to Hanger Lane to see River Island to make sure that we got a deal across the line and agreed the last legal points with Kate, who's here today as well from the leasing team. And yesterday I was in Berkeley Square to see Godiva. So Godiva chocolates we've just exchanged with in one of the centres, and we've got another deal with Legals and another 2 deals that we're talking to them about. I then had a call with Debenhams yesterday afternoon, just about a general catch-up on the new strategy that they've clearly got, and trying to understand a bit more around that and how that relates to our portfolio. So again, my point is that, you know, we are talking, that's just me, the whole team are talking every day to retailers direct, understanding what is going on. And I think, just in summary, you know, what our job in leasing is that we carefully curate retail in these destinations. You know, this is about bringing all those things together to ensure that we attract more shoppers, more spend, and ensure that we refresh that retail mix consistently. You know, given the quality of assets that we've got, that plays a huge part in all of that in terms of that supply-demand equation for us. So I hope that's given you a little bit insight into the leasing market and what goes on in my world, what keeps me awake at night. So I'm going to pass over to Alex, who's going to give you a little bit of insight into the physical store and online.
So firstly, I thought it'd be useful to remind ourselves about the history of retail and the evolutions that have gone on throughout retail, where we are today and where we might be going next. So obviously, the high street used to be full of independents, they became multiples, they then moved out of town. Then e-commerce came along. E-commerce required retailers to move very quickly into new technology that was very expensive. It took up a lot of their time and a lot of their resource. And at the same time, they had to focus purely on this new exciting channel, which meant that they left stores to their own devices for a time. Now, this meant that there was a bit of a sort of crisis about what is the role of stores? Are they in the right locations? But ultimately, stores were still the focus of most of the sales. As retailers have become more comfortable about e-commerce, they realise there's an omni-channel world out there where they need to bring all these channels together to create a seamless, customer-centric experience. And we know that stores are still fundamentally the lion's share of all retailer sales and support e-commerce in quite a few important areas in terms of logistics. Going forward, what's going to happen over the next few years is we're going to move from e-commerce to automated commerce. And that means that we'll no longer look at computer screens, but we'll talk to someone like Alexa, and we'll tell Alexa what we want. Now, that's highly risky for a number of pure players, because all Alexa will do is order you the last brand that you bought in that commodity. So say you're ordering some razors, and you say to Alexa, buy me some more razors, Alexa. Alexa will go and get the last brand that you bought. It won't look around at other brands. It will just get the last brand sent to you. Now, if you're a brand, you risk being locked out by automated commerce because all it will do is replenish the last thing you ordered. And that's going to be key for brands going forward. If they can't be seen by the consumer can't buy them. And that's why physical retail is in some ways going to become more important in the future to retailers and brands than they are now. And that's why we're seeing quite a few, what we'd say traditional pure players and brands that you'd never expect to have stores, creating stores. So, people like Dyson, Sonos, pure players who realise that actually online is going to be fundamentally dominated by a few very big players, Amazon and eBay. And therefore, if they want to see have their brand be seen and for consumers to interact with that brand, they need to be seen out in the marketplace. And therefore, big flagship locations in the centre of city centres is going to be a key area for these brands to explore and look to develop space in. What we did earlier this year is we carried out some research with 50 leading retailers. And we want to understand what they thought the future of their stores would be. So very importantly, what we did is we went out and we talked to chief executives, chief financial officers, heads of multi-channel, heads of marketing. The one thing we specifically didn't go and talk to were members of the property team because we didn't want turkeys voting for Christmas. And we said, where do you see your stores in 5 years' time? And the answers were that 70% of retailers see stores as important or more important going forward as they are today. 80% of retailers plan to open more flagship stores in the future. And also about 80% of retailers feel that stores will play a more important role going forward in driving online sales for their business. So fundamental to the omni-channel picture going forward. And what we're seeing, interestingly, is probably two types of retailers moving in slightly different directions in terms of their store requirements. So the retailers who historically have had large estates will naturally downsize a bit. They probably don't need as many stores as they had historically. So retailers who have more than 300 stores, you might expect them to shrink their estate. But at the same time, there's a large number of emerging retailers, new brands coming from pure play, who'll be looking to expand their estates at the same time. If we think about, let's say, what is held up as probably the best multi-channel retailer in the country, John Lewis. John Lewis still have 50 stores. Hammerson, all our shopping centres are in the top 20 cities. So even in the most rationalised estates, Hammerson centres should still be on every retailer's shopping list. The other thing we need to consider is the role of stores. And the point here is that stores no longer play their traditional role. In fact, they're playing a whole multitude of roles going forward, and retailers will use stores for different purposes. And this is why sometimes when we're talking to people about the performance of our centres, some of the old metrics don't really work as well as they used to. So when people talk about sales densities and OCRs, how do you apply that to a Tesla showroom or a Sonos showroom? You can't really, but it doesn't mean that those spaces aren't still very successful. I think of stores playing 4 key roles, and I've tried to highlight them here. So here, consumer products, this is about marketing. This is about people like Hotel Chocolat or the Microsoft store, who see it as part of their marketing budget and really a way of spreading the brand and the concept of the brand to consumers. Up here are people who use their stores for curation, and it's all about editing the experience, editing the endless aisle, making things easier for people and customer service. And that's something that John Lewis do very well. You know, one of the problems with the internet is sometimes you're almost faced with too many options and you don't know which one to go to. So you go to John Lewis, they've edited down the range, and you've got someone there who will give you expert advice on that product. Then there's the deliverer. So someone like Screwfix, someone who provides that final mile solution to help save on some of the e-commerce logistics and make things highly convenient for people to come and collect items very quickly. And then down here, the discounters, the probably slightly more traditional retailers who've decided probably e-commerce isn't for them. It's largely too expensive because they're all about brand, they're all about value and discount. So retail space offers a wide variety of roles for stores going forward, and different retailers will have different purposes for their stores and how it interacts with their wider omni-channel offering. When we look at the split between the different channels, even by 2021, stores were still expected to cover 84% of all sales. And it's worth considering some of the research we've done in our centres, where 3% of our consumers come into doing click and collect. But interestingly enough, you would assume that they're primarily just there to get one product. And they could have, come in to get an ASOS product from one of our Collect Plus kiosks. If they go into a store to get a click and collect product, 18% of them go on to buy other things in that store that they may never have planned to buy in the first place. Those shoppers, the click and collect shoppers, who primarily came with one focus, actually have a higher conversion rate than general customers in our shopping centres. When we look at the importance of stores in terms of online sales, people who've done online research before they come to our centres have a 23% higher conversion rate in our centres and spent 36% more. And it's at this point, there's a couple of interesting bits of research that have gone in the last year. Firstly, with British Land, who investigated internet traffic rates in catchment areas around their centres before a store opened and after a store opened. And they found typically internet traffic for those brands rose by 52% in the catchment area after a store was opened. Conversely, last year, at the beginning of the year, Kohl's closed 18 stores in America. They found in the catchment areas of those 18 stores, internet sales fell 10% consistently across all those catchment areas. So when we think about physical retail versus online, it's not really like that. It really is an omni-channel offering now, and the two are highly reliant on one another. So when we consider stores and the fact that most of our metrics and the way we collect information from our retailers is potentially slightly one-dimensional. When we collect sales, we collect till sales from our retailers. But we think that understates the true value of stores to those retailers. So as we've highlighted, click and collect and online transactions originated in the store account for about 10 to 14% of additional sales on top of the in-store till sales that we see. Then there's the retail halo effect. So that's the example I used with British Land and Kohl's. That creates an increase in pure internet sales for that brand in that catchment area. And we think that is valued at about another 5 to 7% on top of the pure till sales that we see in store. And then on top of that, there's the click and collect, the point I made about the fact that 3% of people come in just to do a click and collect, but actually 18% of them go on to buy other things in that store, and then they have a higher conversion rate throughout the rest of the shopping centre than people who didn't come specifically for a click and collect item. So drawing all this together, we feel that in flagship locations, typically retailers, or what we see from retailers' performance, is understating the true value of those stores somewhere in the order of 20%. And we know in the case of some very large department stores who have a highly have a very strong multi-channel offer, we know that it's probably somewhere in the order of 30 to 40%. So stores are still very fundamentally central to all retail sales. Pure players are realizing that in the next phase of e-commerce, space is going to have a new purpose and a new reason to build brands and build a relationship with consumers. Because ultimately, if you purely stay online, you are not building a proper relationship with consumers, and you risk being squeezed out of that online market by the fact that that online market is now dominated by one or two players, and those one or two players will take multi-channel retail or e-commerce into an automated commerce market.